The shotgun was great for things that moved too quickly to aim at accurately, so you know, you could use a shotgun to hit something that was moving rapidly or that was a small target. And the shotgun is still the preferred method of you know, harvesting something that flies or runs. The shot shells themselves improved. They started out with brass shot shells, which you had to recollect because it was expensive, more expensive then than it is now. And they improved to paper cartridges. The downside was moisture getting into the cartridges. They only lasted so long. And eventually they moved along to the plastic shot shells. Plastic shot shells kept everything watertight, kept it preserved, and that's what we're still using today. They came with their own problems though. They weren't very valuable. And you know, as people fired them, they would leave them laying. They created a lot of trouble. Now again, when people have problems, they look for ways to solve them. So some of the first ideas on how to use these spent shot shells weren't that great. But you know, the juices were flowing and people were thinking. They got a little artistic and they're not very practical, but you know, people came up with all kinds of ideas. And you can only make so many wall sconces and so many Christmas lights, and there were more shot shells that people could put to use. Until one day, somebody came up with the idea of just reusing the shells. Let's just reload them and fire them again. That's when reloading was born. Which brings us to this piece of equipment over here that we brought. This is a shot shell reloader. Go ahead. Caleb has staged up a shot shell, and this stroke of the handle has just loaded it into the die. Now as he brings it up, it's going to eject the spent primer from the base. And we're going to reload that spent primer. But this would be a new primer he would be installing. And as he brings it down, it's going to insert that in the hole left by the old primer. Now as he rotates this, it's going to come into position to have the gunpowder loaded into it. We're using cornmeal. And now the gunpowder's been loaded. This manifold has bushings that control the volume that's being dropped in. So now that the shell has gunpowder in it, he's going to insert a wad. Now this wad goes on top of the gunpowder and it separates the gunpowder from the shot. Now the next stage, as he moves it around, is going to seat the wad tightly down on top of the gunpowder, because if there's an air gap, it becomes an explosive rather than a propellant. The next stage here is going to load our shot, which we're using curled barley. This is probably the only shell a rabbit would like fired at it. So he's loading the shot right now, with the same manifold. You probably noticed that this machine has multiple stations. You can load the whole machine up with shells so that with every stroke of the handle, you're entering a new shell to begin the process and ejecting a finished product. Now he's starting to crimp. The station he's in right now, you probably can't see it back around here, but the station he's in now is a pre-crimp. It's starting to close the top of the shell together. And the next station is going to seal that crimp. There are a lot of steps. It's a 10-step station, but once you get the whole thing full, every stroke of the handle, a new shell is dropping out. Now the next station is going to eject this finished product that Caleb just made.
How many shells can you produce? Yeah, how fast?
The biggest batch that I ever did was 500. We did that in about an hour and a half.
Okay, but
So you can do it a lot faster.
they can't do it some type of robotic or
Well, sure.
electronic
This is for a home hobbyist. This isn't obviously an industry that's higher automation.
You sell those?
Do they sell these? Yeah, these actually only run about $100. They're not very expensive. You, can get them used for
You
less
sell the
than-
shells?
Oh, do I sell the shells? No, that's illegal.
Oh, is it really?
But you can reload your own. And that's what we do. We reload the kind of shells we want, and we reload, heavier or lighter charges, however you want to do it. And you save about 50% of the price by loading your own. And if anybody has any other questions, Caleb will take them. He knows as much about this process as probably anybody in the room.
So now the newer shotguns, do they discharge shells? The newer shotguns, I can't remember.
Well, it depends on the style of shotgun. That's more to do with how the shotgun is built. But they all use the same type of shell. They all use this exact same type of shell. And this will fire in any of the modern shotguns.
So should we keep the shells and send them?
Well, actually, you should be keeping the shells because if you leave them laying around, it's litter. But, if you're shooting at a range or something, they collect them and they actually sell them.
Oh, really?
Because reloaders like me will go in and buy a bag of spent shot shells to reload them. So they make money on them. If you leave them laying there, you're not littering at a range. So they're going to take advantage of you.
So where do you take, like, if you're like a recyclist, where do you take it to?
Well, if you just keep them, you can take them into a gun range. Any of the state gun ranges, you can go in and get shells for free to reload. That's where I got these shells that we're passing around.
But they won't refill them for you?
No, they won't reload them for you. You have to either do that yourself or buy new shells. There's a liability to it. You know, this is for a hobbyist, and as you can see from the barrel that I passed around a few minutes ago, things can go wrong. So, you know, you have to take that responsibility on yourself. You shouldn't do that for others. And go ahead.
No, can you make a variety of different gauges?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, this is set up for 12 gauge, but there are a variety of different size shotguns, and you can reload for all of them. Everything from a 410 on up. I have here, you know, a couple of actual like cookbooks. These are recipe books that have different combinations for different loads. So you can make whatever you want. You can make really light loads. We actually load blanks for training our dog, and we load them up with cream of wheat instead of shot. You know, that way it's safe to fire and the dog can get used to the sound of the gun.
How hard is it to switch it over to like a 20 gauge from a 12 gauge?
Well, you have to switch. Every one of these posts has to switch. And then you have to have different bushings. So it you know, probably take about an hour to get it ready to change gauge. But most people shoot one gauge or shoot only a couple gauges. And it's actually so cheap to buy the machines that you can have 2 different machines and just leave them set up.
Can you do handguns like knives?
You can do handguns, but this is not the equipment that you would use for that. That's a whole different discussion.
Can you do slugs out there?
No. The things that you don't reload are steel shot for ducks. You don't reload slugs, and you don't reload buckshot. Those are special loads, and they have special procedures. Again, you guys saw the barrel I passed around. You know, it may not be much of a phase, but I like it, and I don't want to do that more than once. That's why they don't. That's why they don't do special loads.
How about those non-lethal bullets that police shoot at people?
Again, if it's not in that book, I'm not going to touch it. These loads are tested. They actually list the breech pressures that these loads produce and the velocities they come out at. So you know what you're doing when you take a recipe out of a book like this. And that sums it up.